Show, and our first guest is Mike Bolhuis. He is a specialist investigator. He's here to talk to us about the Moti family whose four children were kidnapped last year, their four sons. Alhamdulillah, they have been reunited with the family. However, we have now learned that the family have relocated to Dubai, and they have interdicted the police from interviewing their children or any other family member. They believe that this is way too traumatic, and the children have been through enough as it is, and they have just packed up, gone ahead. With their lives in Dubai. So, what does the police, SAPS, and people like Mike Bolhuis, who is a specialist investigator, uh, feel about a situation like this? I mean, I get it. If it was my children, and if we had been put through such a harrowing experience, I guess I too would want to do that. I'd want to pack up and just get far away from this country as I possibly could and start afresh elsewhere where my children will be safe, where I will be safe, where I don't have to worry that we're being soft targets. So I get that the family want to have now nothing to do with this case any longer moving forward. But what does it say to the criminals? And what does it say to the rest of us here in South Africa, very especially other families who have undergone a similar situation where loved ones have been kidnapped, possibly reunited, or possibly still waiting to be reunited with their loved ones? Mike Bolhuis, specialist investigator, good morning. Welcome to the program.
Opportunity. Yes, you actually said everything that is important. However, where the whole nation, the whole world was made aware of this kidnapping, it's one of, if not the biggest expose of a kidnapping that we've ever had in South Africa. And it drew the attention via media worldwide. There were many people that got involved in supporting the family, praying for them. There was an uprising. And then the police in itself took this matter, and I believe they do take kidnappings very seriously. But they went to the extreme, and even due to this kidnapping, have recently created a special task force that will deal with the identifying of kidnappings, evaluation thereof, investigating them, and then solving them as always, as also to prevent them. That is how we identify crime in South Africa, is those 4 points. So it is expected then, when in this specific case where there was no evidence left behind, absolutely nothing. This was like the perfect crime. When the kids were taken, no evidence whatsoever. There was no witnesses. There was no forensic evidence left behind, no electronic footage, nothing. It was an extremely well-planned kidnapping, as is most of these high-level kidnappings done by these transatlantic criminals. They took the kids, and then when the kids was returned, we do not know what happened with negotiations in between. You would expect that the family would find some kind of avenue if they do not trust the police or the country, or what you've mentioned there, the dire situation that they find themselves in. So I've mentioned before, and I've actually in a way predicted this in all our previous talks and on TV as well as on radio, that this might happen. And now we see this, and this happens actually many a times. But for us as a country to identify this crime, to solve it, and to prevent it, you need to assist the police. And not every policeman is corrupt, and the country is not corrupt in its totality. So once a nation has stood up and the police has stood up together, working together, I I don't feel, I know it's the right thing to do, that everybody should stand and work together. And us as specialist investigators, private investigators, security companies, the police and the public should stand together, work together, and get an answer or get answers on this specific case that has been worldwide exposed. And let's take in consideration, this is probably the worst kidnapping this country has ever seen. I mean, 4 boys, 4 kids, as you have said. Well, or any listener here, what would you do if just one of your children are taken? And usually on this high level kidnappings, they would take one child or the businessman in the family. So this is something that can escalate if it's not dealt with, because crime begets crime. If a criminal
Absolutely.
or a criminal entity commits a crime and they can get away with it, it incites and it creates other groups and syndicates and criminals to do so. So it's very, very important to consider. And I beg the family, if they are watching or listening today, I beg you to come forward and assist. You may identify who you trust. If you do not trust the police, you can work through lawyers or through the medical team that you have that have assisted you, or through your religious groups, or any party that you totally and absolutely trust, in order to give information and get information out. For that matter, we could be called. There can and should be um, people involved here to assist the police in order to identify these criminals and have them brought to justice. If this is not done, it leaves the public, it leaves the police, it leaves all of us in a situation where we're not 100% sure why this isn't done. And then you'll get stories and rumors, which is a big problem on social media. We know it, and we know it everywhere. Social media is probably one of the biggest problems in the world, and it hampers and affects a lot of cases in the world. And I have a very big problem with social media because it's totally abused. It's totally, and I'm not saying absolutely everybody, but most people, unfortunately, are very irresponsible. They don't really say what they mean and mean what they say. They just spew out trash, and that causes serious harm. But be that as it may, the police should have the information. Now, I hope when the kids were brought back, a proper crime kit was taken of the kids. For those who do not understand that, it means the moment the kids were identified that they were safe, a special police unit should have been there to take all the DNA and forensic information before anybody touches them, so that the total physical body of the children is thoroughly examined and all the forensic evidence has been obtained of each child and the scene where they were dropped, the whole scene in its totality. Also, the scene as how did they get there, and the area should have been investigated. If that is not done, it's going to already be a very big hamper in the investigation, and the investigation could be bungled. But
Mike, you speak,
say
carry
again?
on.
Yeah.
You
So
speak about, all right, you complete your train of thought and I'll pose my next question to you.
thanks. So once that has been done, what should have happened is the children should have been dealt with a highly specialized police unit that knows how to work with children that has undergone serious violent crime. And they will build a trust with these children and the parents. But eventually, when that trust is there and it's in place and they're consoled and they're healthy, they should have been interviewed as a group and also one by one in order to establish the slightest and all information that you can retrieve from them, combined with then the forensic evidence that is initially, as I've explained, that should have been kept, could have given quite an indication or information that can lead to, have these criminals done this before? Is this a modus operandi? Has there been any other similar or equal crimes committed by them? And has it been reported at other police stations in order to see if wherever there's a bit of evidence, with this evidence can identify these criminals and then can be acted against. Why is this important? Because the country needs to see that crime does not pay. Presently, crime pays. You can commit crime and you can get away with it. And as long as, excuse me, as long as these kidnappings, which is of the worst crimes in our country, is not dealt with on a zero tolerance basis and not dealt with by all of us assisting the police um, to eradicate this crime, properly identify, solve it, prevent it, and eradicate it, this crime will escalate because crime begets crime and crime pays.
So, Mike, I'm thinking that there is a possibility that the family was so intimidated that
Mm,
possibly the kidnappers did make contact and warn them if
mm.
they do, in fact, speak either to the media or the police that they're being watched all the time and they put themselves at serious risk. And receiving, we are supposing that that might be one of the scenarios, and supposing that that did in fact happen, you kind of don't blame the family for clamming up
Mhm.
totally and not wanting to discuss this any further with media or the authorities. How do they move forward? I can't even begin to imagine the pain, the heartache, and the trauma that this family is undergoing, even though they now believe that they're in a safer space being settled or resettled in Dubai.
I hear you, and you are right. Only those who have gone through this, only the family really knows how traumatized and how immense this crime effect that it has on their lives. So you are right. It's very easy to just speculate and talk. We do a lot of kidnappings and we investigate extreme, serious, violent crime. So we understand what people go through. And yes, they would have been threatened, guaranteed. These kidnappers have a way of influencing people's lives even afterwards by saying, if you go to the authorities, um, I'm of the assumption that there was some kind of negotiation and some kind of fee paid. Otherwise, the kids would not have been returned. But that is speculation. There's no facts. So we can make a lot of deductions and a lot of assumptions. But information in a police case or an investigation always relies on factual information and not hearsay and assumption. So I want to make that very clear. But the possibility of them being, and we don't have the facts, that they have been extremely threatened after the kids were returned, that they are watched and monitored, as you say, and if they, I mean, all they have to say is, listen, if you open your mouths or speak to the authorities, we do this again, or we do this to that family member or that family or that. There's so many ways and means of intimidation and threats that they can clamp these families down in order. They can actually even have said to them, you move, go away, get out of the country. So we wouldn't know, but there is also avenues dealing with that. It is my opinion that the family, and this is my opinion, that the family should have sought out the best avenues in order to get the information to the authorities, in order to prevent this crime happening again, in order to identify this syndicate, in order to give all the South Africans that have supported them, the media, the public, everybody, some kind of solace and an answer and say, listen, we're doing our bit. We have gone through this. Everybody knows really in their hearts they couldn't even imagine what this family has gone through. But here, we are also prepared to take the extra step, and then you can appoint proper bodyguards. These families are very rich and they can afford thorough protection, and they can afford to have proper safety and security. And in that time, the information could have led to arrests and it could have made a difference. Also, take in consideration that these criminals aren't stupid. They will assume, and they most probably know what we're talking about, that there would be stuff in place. I mean, the police has recently had success with a kidnapping, And they are seeing that the nation, the police, private security industries are all standing together to try and prevent this kind of crime. So they will be much more careful if they were to act out their threat and say, we're coming again. So I once again wants to urge the family, if they're watching this today, to seek an avenue. And if that means calling us or anybody that they really trust in order to get the information, in order to assist the police, so that the kidnapping spree in South Africa, which is escalating, can be properly identified, investigated, prevented, and eradicated.
All I can say is I truly hope and pray that the family does eventually get over all that trauma and they can live in peace and safety wherever they've decided to make their second home. Whilst we're talking about kidnapping, I need to touch on two other kidnapping cases. Mike, I know you're on top of this because obviously you've taken a keen interest in these type of cases. The 11-year-old girl that was kidnapped in Mayfair, Johannesburg, outside the school in November last year, thankfully has been reunited with her family last week. We also hear that in connection with that case, someone has been arrested in Mozambique. What more do you know about that, and what do you believe happened here? And I know this is mere speculation on both my part and your part, but just to try and get an understanding and for the public to be aware of the type of modus operandi that is in play here.
Yes, look, the police and specialist investigators like ourselves rely on the public's support in the form of informants. So the special police task unit is highly trained. It's nationwide, and they will have informants. And the fortunate thing for us is that there's no honor amongst criminals. Criminals sometimes get into a fight amongst themselves, and then they either talk or information leaks out or one comes forward. So we wouldn't know, but it is good that the police is handling it in such a way and not giving any of its strategies or any of their ways and means of investigations, how they do it, out as public information. The police is the ultimate authority in the country. And as I've said before, not all police are corrupt. There's a lot of police corruption. We've recently seen of policemen being involved in kidnappings. We've seen so many policemen being involved in very serious crimes. And it's all over the news and always a splash so that everybody knows of this. But like let's just stick to the organization, if you can call it, of the police. There are those that really is a work at the police that wants to make a difference, wants to prevent crime, wants to solve crime, etc., etc. And it makes it very difficult for highly specialized police units to do so if they do not have the total support. And one of the total support structures that they rely on is that you give your complete cooperation. You know, you
Okay.
cannot.
Okay, Mike, can I just, time constraints as always. My final question to you is, again, you must have heard and read about this very sad case, the case that ended really very, very badly. The man, the 40, I think it was 42, 47-year-old man in Lenasia, Mr. Khan, who was kidnapped a couple of months ago. I think it was October. It might have been further back than then. His car was found in Eldorado Park in Johannesburg. He was last seen in a suburb called Greymont in Johannesburg. A ransom call was made to the family, and then nothing was heard thereafter. Very sadly, his body was found at the Roodeplaat Dam last week. What do you think went wrong there, that it ended so tragically for him and that particular family, the Khan family?
Yeah, this is a very shocking case and very close to us. The family was, I know the family quite well. I know the husband. I know the person that died quite well. He contacted me before. He was a target actually several times. At a stage, he was robbed of a very extremely expensive watch. But anyway, the history between me and Mr. Khan came to a spot where I many a times warned him that they are after him, they've identified him, and it's a very big concern to me. I spoke to his wife just some time ago as well, and I've offered our services, and I've made suggestions and infiltrations, etc. But the family was also, as you previously said, extremely threatened. And you get these cases where they may have ulterior motives and may kill a person. And it could be not only for the ransom money, it could have been that there was other issues between the parties. I have not further investigated the case. I assume also that those who are involved here might be a syndicate or a group of people that had business dealings or issues with Mr. Khan and did a kidnapping as well. So maybe the intention all along was, listen, we're going to kill this guy, and we're going to, in the same process, see if we can get 5 or 10 million out of him, because that was the amount they wanted. So it's very difficult to really get people to, as I've previously said, where we stopped, to give their full support. But it is necessary. We need to take that chance and that step, but there's avenues that could be followed. And this is the thing that concerns me the most. The life of a human being, the worth of a human being, is not the same as 20 years ago. Criminals today would not think twice to kill you, and it could be for a cell phone, or it can be on a kidnapping case. So we need to be positively paranoid, and we need to be aware that South Africa is unfortunately a crime-ridden country, and we should go out of our way to make a difference altogether. Look past color, look past political affiliations, look past everything, religion, etc., and work with the police and have one common goal, and that is to identify crime, investigate it thoroughly, prevent it, and eradicate it.
Mike Bolhuis, thank you indeed. On that very, very sad note, we end the show today. Please, God, let this not continue in our country. We value our lives, we value our families, but thank you to experts like yourselves that try and assist these families that are so torn apart and devastated by this very heinous crime. You go well, God bless, and may be a good year for you, 2022. That was Mike Bolhuis, a specialist investigator, talking to us about kidnappings in South Africa. Go well.
Thank you. God bless everybody. And thank you so much for the opportunity. And God bless our nation with all of the
Absolutely.
best for 2022. Thank you so much.
8:38 exactly. News and views right here on Salam Media.